do a quick warm up here before we get going, alright?
Okay,
so if you just follow me, and if you do what I do, alright? Slowly, this is not racing, and this is the sort of thing you can do if you've got someone new, alright? So when you're ready, setting off, so come and step off quickly. Alright? Join. Yeah, it's just a nice, easy in and out. It's all very basic for most people, but if people haven't ridden for a while. Okay, and we're stopping. So when you ask people to stop, just look back. Is everybody stopping? Getting off okay? Yeah, everybody can stop. Everybody knows okay. Yeah, and then do one final set off, and then if you then step to one side and just ask the group next one, just do another one last lap.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to change direction, then do. And this allows you to then just look. And people step. So it might be that you do this and you can see someone's a little bit wobbly. So that's when that dynamic risk assessment comes in. You might decide that you might be going down a busy road. So that's the point at which you might, for this ride. Yeah. So I've seen everybody can stop and start. And what you don't ever want to do is cycle in the gutter. And I know, drivers get annoyed with cyclists, we all know that. And it's very tempting to really hug the curb, but it's where you get your potholes, it's where you get your glass, and it's where you're liable to scuff the curb and come a cropper. So don't ever ride too close to the curb. However tempting it is, and however much you think that's making you safe, you have a group you're looking after here. What you do on your own rides is up to you. We're talking about group riding here, all right? So you've got, does anybody, you know the two positions? What are you, yeah? Did you want to show me primary? If this is our road and this is the curb, where's your primary position going to be?
Primary is roughly about there.
Yeah. So this is your riding position. This is where you would ride most of the time in a ride, on your primary position. But there are going to be times where you want to go into secondary position, which is coming out into the road. And what you're doing is you're taking a more dominant position in the road. So you're doing two things. You're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping your group safe, but you're also signalling to cars that there's no room for you to squeeze past me here, all right? Because that's really important, because we all know cars do what they can to squeeze past. So give me some ideas, when might you move into secondary?
Line of parked cars.
Yeah, line of parked cars. So that typical, someone opening a car door. If you see a line of parked cars, I would be there, you'll be moving into secondary, which isn't, you're not going up to the line, you're not risking people then undertaking, because that does happen as well, and that's not fun. You're just taking a dominant position in the road, all right? When else might you go into secondary position?
Traffic lights.
Traffic lights, yeah, traffic lights. Any other ideas? What about when you're passing a junction? So if you're coming along a road and there's a junction, you might be moving to secondary there, because you always have that fear of somebody pulling out. All right, particularly if there's a blind spot, if there's a car park ahead of the junction, you'd be moving out. And this would be done with your assistant at the back. They would be the one moving out first, and then the ride follows out, okay? So we've got our snake, so we're going to be doing some snaking on the road in a minute. And that is essentially, you've got a head of a snake, which is your leader, and then you've got the tail of a snake, which is your assistant, and everybody in between is the snake. So you follow that lead, it's following a leader really. When you're out on a ride, I would also, we did some hand signalling before, I would also make it clear when you do your ride introduction whether you are wanting or expecting people to signal. Because there's always, do I put my hand up, do I not? Generally, if you've got in a ride with a lead and an assist, there should be no need for people in the middle to have to signal. Some people do, if you're used to riding like that, you do. There's no problem if people do. But actually, if you've got somebody that's new, maybe isn't as confident, I'd be asking to keep their hands on the handlebars. So saying, we'll be signalling, no need for you to signal unless you particularly want to. Person at the back is indicating to traffic. Person at the front is the signposting. They're the one leading the direction, showing the group where you're going to be going, all right? So the other times you might move into secondary position is if you're taking a turn. So if you're coming along and you want to take a left-hand turn, yeah, so rather than coming along and skimming round the corner, yeah, and risking taking out a pedestrian, because pedestrians, who has right of way if a pedestrian stood there? Don't forget now, pedestrians have right of way. If somebody is standing there about to cross the road, you need to wait. I have to say it's a brave pedestrian to just do that blindly, but the highway code has been updated and made very clear now. I don't know if have you heard of the hierarchy of road users? No. So this is basically the most vulnerable pedestrians have priority. Cyclists, motorcycles, cars, vans and trucks. So in theory, a car should let go to you, or a van should let go to you. Be cautious about that, is all I would say. If you all cycle, I'm sure you all know that, you know, road users are not always that friendly to cyclists, and I would be a little bit cautious about that. But do bear in mind if you're turning, just to look out for pedestrians and give way if you see them, all right? So you're coming out into secondary position. You're signalling. So you're signalling, but you're taking that more dominant position in the road, and you're coming into secondary, okay? And then you're moving back into your primary position once you're on the flow of the road. If you were coming along and you were taking a right-hand turn for the same reason, you'd be coming into secondary position. Your assistant is going to be coming up, and we're going to be waiting here in secondary position. So nobody can undertake, nobody can overtake, all right? We've taken up the road because we're stopping. So we need people behind us to stop, all right? So then we're going to be turning here, and your assistant is going to be guiding us across. That's really the role of the assistant, is to move the group safely so the leader can then assist and take forward, all right? You ready to go into the cars? Then do stop. Do try and keep, you want to keep the flow of don't, it's not that we're saying you have to stop at junctions. And the other thing I would say, I don't know if you notice, so when you're leading a ride, you can see so when you're riding a bike normally, I'm turning left, that's what we recommend. The first thing you're doing is you're saying to your something's happening. I'm giving you a signal, all right? Then you indicate left, or you indicate, up and right. So that's got to be really clear. He can't hear me down the back, so he'll likely to know the route we're taking, and he may preempt it and maybe coming up before I even signal, particularly if you've got a long route. Other thing just to bear in mind as we were going along, you can see we've started to get split up. You've got to just bear in mind the differences in speed. Like if you're leading on an e-bike, that's really important, because it's really common people leading on e-bikes going absolutely whizzing off, leaving everyone for dust, and then actually you've left half the group behind. So just keep in mind, and when you're going along, when you're leading, just keep checking over your shoulder. Just checking in. Can you see your group? Can you see your leader? Make sure it's safe. You don't want to be wobbling around the place. It's just checking in, all right? And trying to keep the group safe. Another thought is on these sort of large, wide residential roads, cycle paths, anywhere like that. If it's nice to double up, people want to chat and it's safe, double up. It makes the group smaller. It's easier for cars to get past. But actually, it's much easier for a car to overtake a short, wide group than it is for a huge. There are certain situations where you've got significant roads. Rides are meant to be enjoyable, chat. So if there is an opportunity to double up, anything like that, bring people together, so they can chat, keep the group together. So just things to think about. So just being really conscious of the group behind you, and remembering you're signalling to that person at the back. And the other thing about letting your group split up too much, you get to a junction, that poor person at the back has got a good old job to get to you before that junction. So give him lots of notice, more notice than you would do when you're riding with another individual. All I need to do when I'm turning left, that's all I'm doing. Whereas here, I I've got to tell Oliver he's got to get up the front. You know, we've got a group. There's more to be done. So it's just thinking group riding rather than individual riding. All right.
And it depends where you ride as well. If you're riding off road,